So welcome everybody to today's podcast. My name is Jim Hodges, Chief Analyst at Heavy Reading. And today I'm joined by Angela Logothetis. Angela is the Amdocs Open Network CTO. So welcome, Angela.
Hi, Jim. It's really great to be chatting with you again today.
Great. So in our podcast today, we're going to be talking about digitization of front office and back office systems. And in a lot of the work we do in Heavy Reading, we talk to service providers, and we've seen over the last couple of years there's been a real focus on digitizing front end interfaces so that you can provide better customer experience. Things like self-service portals, customized billing and things like that. But it seems that on the operational side, from a back end or a back office perspective, that there's been it's been a slower process, and I think that's really obviously an important part of it, because I think to really achieve kind of a true digital experience, you need to have both, I guess, front office and back office systems kind of working in harmony, and so that means service assurance platforms must be digitized soon or too as well. So I mean, I'm just wondering from your perspective as we start off with the discussion, would you first agree that there's been sort of a stronger focus on some of these front-end systems to enable customer experience? And maybe just kind of give me your thoughts on where we are in terms of the digitalization in the telco industry as a whole.
Yeah, so a really interesting question. So if I look back over the last couple of years, many service providers have been focused on digitizing what I would call their interaction with the customer, right? So in the shop front, trying to make that more of a digital customer experience, having an app, having a web application whereby customers can interact, and then obviously through social media. We're now seeing the kind of service provider market leaders expanding these digital strategies pretty much in three areas. So the first thing is communication service providers, CSPs as we think of them today, are really starting to transform themselves to be digital service providers, or DSPs. And this is all about both delivering the new digital services that new networks like 5G will enable, but also making sure that they're digital all the way through their front office and their back office, all the way throughout their business. The second area that they're looking at doing is really that expanding the digitization of not just the customer interaction, but the entire customer journey. And from my perspective, sitting in the Amdocs Open Network team, this is really about the digital experience all the way for the customer onto the network and the service that it delivers. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, I think, as we go through this podcast. And then the final thing is they're looking at digitizing the employee experience. And this is kind of really important as employees actually demand more from their employers in terms of the way they work, and to be able to do more of their jobs digitally and to be able to do their jobs remotely, especially important in the times that we're in now, right? So all of these sorts of digital expansions are starting to happen with the market leaders.
That's interesting. The third point, employee experience, is something I hadn't really thought of, but as you said, it's really an important part, because as we move forward and we start automating systems with things like 5G, you have to be able to give the employees those tools to be able to, I guess, successfully interact with those systems. That's really a key interesting point.
I mean, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So, if we kind of agree that there's been more of a focus on things like front end automation versus back office, is there, I mean, there obviously sounds like there's some good reasons for that, but maybe you could just kind of summarize why we've, as an industry, kind of gone down that path.
Yeah, look, I think it's a sensible path that people have embarked on, right? Because when you or I think about digital, we think about interacting through technology rather than in person or on paper. So from that perspective, it really made sense to start on the digital customer interaction. And also, if you think about it, there's a fair amount of operational costs for the service providers in managing the customer relationships, right? The shop fronts, the call centers, the sales channels, all of those sorts of things. So it also made sense to start to digitize that, to start to take cost out of the business. So I think starting there made sense. But it's really, the next steps that are going to be critical in their journey, which is, digitizing all the way through to the network and starting really to deliver more than connectivity and to be delivering sort of digital services going forward.
Interesting. And I think the key part about automation is, as I said, we're really looking at now, kind of looking at automation as kind of a holistic tool. And I think that's kind of, as you said, I think that's going to be an important key part of that as we kind of shift focus to digitizing back offices as well. Interesting.
Yeah, and it's kind of also where the really hard part comes into play, right? So for them to be able to digitize, for a service provider to be able to digitize the network and the back office, it really needed a transformation of the network, right? Because when the networks were all physical, you really needed a big human workforce to be able to manage those networks, to build them, to provision a service on them, to assure them. And so network transformation has started to evolve those networks from being physical networks to virtualized and cloud native networks. And once that happens, then you get the ability to start to transform the OSS, which then starts to automate the back office. So the OSS transformation goes hand in hand with the network transformation. So the network changes from physical to virtual to cloud native. The OSS changes from being kind of a database of record and a workflow system that schedules and enables the work of humans to being orchestrated and automated intelligent systems that actually automate the interaction with the network. So they automate the deployment of network, the fulfillment of customer services on network, and do the closed loop assurance of the services, all the sorts of digital journeys that people are looking for.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I guess sort of when I think of this myself, I look at OSS, BSS systems, how they've had to evolve, not just in the context of their own systems, but really what's happening within the industry. And when you think of these OSS, BSS systems, as you said, they were really deployed, many of them, in a non-cloud environment. They really assumed kind of a fixed network domain, if you will, and a network domain that had pretty broad requirements, but it was still kind of well known in terms of how you design networks. But now, as we move into cloud-based networks, or even hybrid networks, where you're using still a lot of legacy services and legacy systems, and you're now starting to roll out cloud-native systems. I mean, to me, that really drives a lot of additional complexity that the service providers, the CSPs, have to think about in an OSS BSS context. And I guess one of the things I always think about is orchestration. We've been covering NFV for over 8 years now, and I remember we first started looking at it and doing research projects. It was all about, the orchestration part was all about service agility and being able to, quickly provision things and bring up systems and manage life cycles. But now we're kind of moving to a system where it's not just about orchestration, but automating this orchestration on kind of a completely different level. So I guess when I see that, I think, well, there's a lot of benefits of this automation in a network management perspective, but you still have to kind of manage the orchestration components as well. And obviously that's something you must be dealing with your customers on a daily basis.
Yeah, so I sort of share your views on the last 8 or so years. I think service providers have made steps towards orchestration and automation, but really they've been doing it inside individual network domains in the network. So you put in place a new part of an enterprise network, then you'll put in place some orchestration and automation around it. You put in place 5G non-standalone RAN or 5G non-standalone RAN, and you put in some orchestration and automation about it. You put a core, and so really they've started the journey towards orchestration and automation, but it's in domains or in silos. And that helps in terms of some cost savings and dealing with. But when we think about the digitization of the service provider and this digital customer experience and digital customer journey, it's not really helping with that, because what's needed to be able to do that is you have to have really what we call service orchestration. So take the entire service that the customer wants and be able to orchestrate that end to end across the network.
Yeah, exactly. And I think when we think of it, to take that discussion maybe one step further, you think of what's happening with 5G, slice-based services, fully automated services, and now slice-based. So now we have to really kind of apply some of those principles to be able to modernize BSS systems kind of more holistically, kind of an end-to-end, because with slicing, not only are we in 5G, not only are we pushing requirements via slices, but we're also pushing compute out to the edge as well, which has kind of some unique requirements in terms of that. And also the services themselves are kind of API driven. So we're kind of developing these service aware networks. So OSS systems have to be kind of enabled to be holistically service aware and be able to support edge applications. So to me, there's another kind of phase of this, another set of requirements associated with modernizing BSS and OSS systems kind of in this holistic way. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think as we see service providers move beyond connectivity into some of these new digital services that 5G networks are going to enable, those services aren't best effort over the top services that consume data on a 5G network any longer, right? They're all the things you just talked about, where you're going to need to be able to dynamically bring up a slice to support the service. You're going to have to, maybe move something out of the cloud and out to the edge. You might have to bring up more network capacity to support the service. So these services, to deliver them, actually needs very, very close interaction with the network and a lot of automation and intelligence around the network, or the service is not going to deliver what the customer is expecting. So I think it's the combination of service providers wanting to introduce agility and efficiency and digital customer experience, along with this new range of digital services that are coming along that are going to drive this true demand around orchestration and automation of the networks.
Interesting. So, I mean, this is obviously, there's a lot of moving parts to this kind of transformation and kind of this digital holistic context. I'm just wondering, have you started to see some service providers or some CSPs actually kind of taking this experience or making these steps and starting to kind of experience some of these benefits we've talked about?
Yeah, so I was thinking about earlier when you were talking about, how do we sort of describe the service providers that have started digitizing the customer interaction and the service providers that have started digitizing the entire customer journey. And one of the things I was thinking about is, we all probably interact with streaming video providers of one brand or another today, right? And so you sign up online, you pay with your credit card or other payment form online, you view the catalogue of TV or movies or content online, and then you select what you want to watch online, right? And that's kind of all the digital customer engagement, right? It's all that front end of house stuff. But then imagine you see a program you really want to watch, and then you have to wait until somebody manually goes off and finds your DVD and loads it into the DVD player and presses play before you can watch it. And that's kind of what's happening a little bit with service providers today, right? So they've digitized the front end experience, but then you still wait to get your broadband service, or you still wait to get your enterprise service. It's not that seamless digital experience all the way to the end thing that you want. And if you think about what cloud vendors and the digital content providers today have done, is they can do what they do partially because they have a simpler infrastructure to manage. Okay, so they've got that as a benefit, whereas the service providers still have very large, very complex hybrid networks to manage. But the other reason is they've invested very, very heavily in building this orchestration and automation and intelligence layer on top of their infrastructure, right? And so that's really where we're seeing the leading edge service providers go, because they recognize that that's the last mile that's key to achieving what they want to achieve. And I guess what we see with 5G coming along, it's a chance to start to do this, right? So 5G networks, by design, by definition, are software defined, and they're virtualized and, fast becoming cloud native. So it's a great opportunity to say the network's transformed from 4G to 5G. It now enables us to start to either transform or implement a next generation of OSS that really completes this part of the digital story or the digital customer experience. And a bit like you were saying earlier, Jim, it's not just really an opportunity. I know I called it an opportunity, but it's almost a necessity, because the size of these networks, the complexity of these networks, the sort of speed of change of these networks, if there's no automation there, they almost become impossible to manage. And then when you think about the vast range of digital services that these 5G networks are going to enable, then it's what you were saying. It's, you're going to have the service and the network working together in real time to actually deliver the quality of experience that the customers are looking for. So kind of some examples. You asked a little bit about examples. So, a simple example for, I don't know if you're a gamer, I'm not, but I have some kids who are. And, if a customer is prepared to pay for a premium gaming package, then it's not enough for a service provider to deliver that as a best effort over the top service, right? The service provider actually needs to be able to configure the customer service with enough bandwidth and low enough latency that they actually get that premium gaming experience. And that may even involve more sophisticated things like moving the gaming out from the cloud to the edge to be closer to the customer to deliver it. Some of our customers that have started doing this, I guess I would say it's never too soon to get started and no step is too small. So I'm thinking back a couple of years, and one of our North American tier 1 customers started their journey towards digitizing and automating the network just by swapping out some hardware ports on Ethernet switches and changing them to software-defined cards on Ethernet switches. And it was a pretty simple network transformation, right? But then the key thing is what they did next. They then enabled the OSS, and it was, our OSS, so we know this story quite well. But then they enabled the OSS so that the enterprise customers could actually, through a digital app, change their bandwidth and change their quality of experience. So all of a sudden they had a new competitive edge in the market because they had changed the customer experience and digitized that for the customer all the way onto the network. And then since then, we've been working with customers who are, just continuing to push the bounds of virtualizing and transforming networks, and then transforming OSS to next generation OSS to do this. So another example is we had another North American customer, but this time in the cable industry, who looked at launching a new digital service. They were launching SD-WAN services, right? The very different definition of a digital cloud native type service. And they quite astutely figured out that, look, if we do this around the connectivity service, then we can do this around a whole raft of add-on capabilities. So they put in place the right orchestration, automation, intelligence layer in OSS, and then they could start not just delivering SD-WAN to the customer, but give them a virtualized CPE, give them a firewall, give them WAN optimization, give them Wi-Fi, give them managed services. And so it opened up a whole new product line that they could be offering and monetizing out to customers.
Really interesting. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that there's a lot of opportunities. And I think when you look at how this all plays out, taking some initial steps first, it's all about strategy, right? In terms of putting in place the basic fundamentals and then building on those. And that's obviously why we call it OSS/BSS transformation. So yeah, really, really interesting to get your take on some of this. And I think there's going to be a real focus on this continuing in 2021 as we move with 5G commercialization with the standalone core and 5GC. So I think there's going to be an even greater focus on where we are today. But it's clear that we're definitely moving into kind of a new era of OSS/BSS from an automation perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we are. And I think you're right about 5G being one of the key drivers around this. And that's where I guess our customers are looking at it around two big areas. One is around enterprise, I think, because enterprises are getting far more sophisticated in their demands around what they want and how they want it. And then around 5G, because we're all going to experience 5G in the new digital services that it enables. And for it to work, it not only needs a digital interaction in terms of buying a 5G service, but it needs a digital customer journey all the way down to the network to deliver that service.
Agreed. So Angela, listen, thank you for joining me today on the podcast. I think we had a really interesting discussion on where we are in the transformation and more to come, but thanks for joining me today and providing your insights.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jim. I really enjoyed it.